Hey there YouTube, this is Mr.Lubufu and I am here with a complete Battle for Zendikar set review. Now like usual, this is mostly a focus of a limited set review, so the focus is on limited, so that way you guys can rock your pre-release. So let's go ahead and start with white cards. We have Angel of Renewal. It's a 6 mana 4/4 flyer, which already is not an unreasonable rate, but when it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each creature you control. Now this is kind of I think this card's very, very powerful. It's also an ally, which is something that's worth keeping in mind. But the biggest problem with some of the giant flyers that they just bounce it or something. And here, the best thing you can do is cast it and gain 3 to 4 life. 3 to 4 life is not normally an irrelevant number when tackled to a big creature. So I think this card's pretty strong. It's gonna be way better in sealed than in draft, but definitely a very powerful card. I'm not a huge fan of Angelic Gift because it just gives flying, but it does at least cantrip. So at worst, it's playable, 23rd playable. You're okay, well I guess I'll play this, and at worst it cantrips. So not great, but not bad. Cliffside Lookout, I'm not a huge fan of 1/1s for 1 if they don't have any relevant effects. This one is a bit of a mana sink, but not a particularly good one. I wouldn't play this in most decks, and I definitely would be ill-advised to play this in sealed. So probably not what you're looking for sealed. And maybe in draft, if you have the Nut ally deck, it's you might play it, but in general, not really. Courier Griffin seems pretty strong, actually. Already being a 4 mana 2/3 flyer, the 3 toughness is huge. There's a lot of 2 power flyers in this format. So having the 3 toughness is huge, and gaining 2 life, 2 life, not irrelevant, but I think his card's actually pretty strong. It's one of the better white commons in the set. Next we have Amaria Shepherd, which it is a 7 mana 4/4 flyer, so it's pretty expensive in that sense, but with the landfall ability of when it enters the battlefield, you can return a non-land permanent from your graveyard to your hand, or if it's a plains, return it to the battlefield. This makes it pseudo cost 8, or you basically play it on turn 8 and then just immediately slam a plains. But if you are able to get one plains trigger to resolve, you are super far ahead. So I think that Amaria Shepherd can be very, very strong. I'm not sure how fast this format is if you get punished a little bit too hard for trying to reach for here, but if you can cast Amaria Shepherd, you're probably in pretty good shape. I think this is one of those swingy, super expensive bombs that maybe, if you cast it, you're super far ahead. Next we have Encircling Fissure, so it's basically a bad fog. It's not completely unplayable. It does have Awaken 2, so you randomly get a 2/2 to also block if you have 5 mana. And you can set up a point where they attack with a bunch of things, and you can set up some favorable blocks and then Encircling Fissure. I think it's okay. Some people are going to get blown out in the limited formats with it, but I'm not a huge fan of this card, but I'm not completely opposed to it. Expedition Envoy is pretty bad. Typically your 1 mana 2/1s, those are what are reserved for constructed. Playing a 1 mana 2 power creature is almost functionally the same as playing a 2 mana 2 power creature. This card doesn't do much. It'll get in a point of damage and not do anything for the rest of the game. So typically pretty bad. Even though it's an ally, still pretty bad. Felidar Cub, sometimes you just need a bear. Sometimes you just need a 2/2 bear. And it's certainly going to see some play in sideboards and the like, because it can destroy enchantments. I'm not sure what sort of enchantments are in the set that can be worth bringing it in, but sometimes you just need a bear with upside, and that's what this is. Felidar Sovereign got bumped down from Mythic to Rare. This card's actually incredibly powerful and limited. So it's, apart from being a giant lifelinker with Vigilance, you don't really need this second text. Just imagine it as a 6 mana 4/6 Vigilance lifelink. That already there. Pretty good. Hard to beat past. And crushes people. Definitely a pretty powerful card. I've played in 99% of my white decks. I typically like my walls to have at least one point of power. Fortified Rampart. If you are against a hyper aggressive deck, certainly bring it in. It blocks all day, every day. But apart from that, not super impressed. Ghostly Sentinel is a completely fine playable creature. It's a 5 mana 3/3 flying with Vigilance. We found that in limited, 5 mana, 3/3 flyers tend to have some other ability or something tacked on. This is completely playable. You know, you're not gonna want to play a ton. You're not gonna want to play like it's just fine. It's okay. Everything is good. Whereas Gideon, as we saw during the Community Cup, if you watch that, Gideon real good. Definitely, I mean he's gonna be a constructed powerhouse as well. But Gideon's nutty and limited. If you get to play him, like your superset card's real good. I can't stress, like, Gideon's just an absolute bomb in this format. You're ahead, great. You're behind, it's not as good as catching you up, but it's still insane. Gideon's Reproach, solid removal spell for the early game. There are a bunch of Eldrazian giant creatures in this format, so Gideon's Reproach isn't like as unconditional as you'd like, but still pretty decent. 2 mana, kill something. You can do a lot of work with it, so it's a pretty strong combat trick. Definitely something I would play a good number of. Next, you have Hero of Gomafada, which is great. Even if you get just the trigger from itself, making your creatures indestructible is pretty solid. It means you can just crack in, just turn your creature sideways, smash their face, not care. Your creatures won't die. Sometimes you have to play in and be like, well, I guess I'm too low. Suppose just have to deal with not attacking. But generally, play this guy, smash face, smash. Next, you have Inspired Charge, which, yeah, it's an instant. It's +2/+1. We've seen this effect in Khan's block, and it was great in Khan's in some in some things. Normally, getting lifelink was a little bit better. This is, you're gonna play this in some decks, but it's not super impressive. You're not gonna want to play multiple copies of it, if at all. Please don't play Kite Sail Scout, like, ever. Just don't do it. I have to tell everyone, like, when I talk with people during pre-release, everyone just wants to play their 1/1 flyers for 1. They're like, oh my god, I get to deal, 1 point of damage. It's going to be great. Don't do it. Just don't. Just avoid Kite-Tail Scout, please. Next, we have Core Blade Whirl. So it's a bear. Great. Sometimes you just need a bear. Fits the curve. And sometimes creatures you control get first strike. Not a bad effect. Definitely pretty playable. Next, we have Core Castigator, which 2 mana 3/1. We've seen that ratio a few times, and it's not unreasonable. And then it has a marginal upside. Can't be blocked by Eldrazi Scions, which are the number one, like, the most things that have 1 power are the Eldrazi Scions. You won't see many things there. So definitely, I think this guy's pretty strong. You can set up a pretty decent deck with him. He is an ally, so he does trigger cards like Core Blade Whirl. So definitely a pretty powerful guy. I am kind of on board with him, but we'll see. Core Entanglers. So this does the best impression of the 3/4 for 5 from Magic Origins, which did the same thing. When it entered the battlefield, it would tap a creature. It's not great. Yes, you can get multiple triggers when you have multiple allies. Maybe I'd play, if you're in that deck, definitely this guy can be a serious workhorse. Otherwise, it's fine. 5 mana for a 3/4. The rate isn't particularly good, so you really need to make the most out of this ability for it to be absurd. As opposed from that, Lantern Scout is actually absurd. The way Lantern Scout reads is, whenever it or another ally enters, your creatures get lifelink, but what makes it absurd is because it gets lifelink, you can just win any race. Because you'll trade some creatures, you'll gain some life, you won't make any bad attacks. This card's very good. Very, very, very good. And it triggers off itself, which is pretty strong. So normally when a new set comes out, I'm pretty high on my 1 mana white combat tricks. I don't like my 1 mana 1/1s, but I do like my 1 mana combat tricks. And this is a pretty good one. +2/+2 and prevent all damage to be dealt to it by colorless sources. Both of those are not irrelevant. Card's very, very, very strong. I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's definitely one of the better combat tricks, and definitely something like if you see an opponent with just white mana open, this is the card to play around. It's certainly, it's certainly very powerful. Makindi Patrol is just a playable 3 mana 2/3. Yeah, your creatures get vigilance, sure. You're just gonna play it if you just need the creature to fit the deck. Otherwise, you don't need to force it. Ondu Greathorn is, I mean, we all love Pillar Field Ox, right? So, this guy feels actually more like Prickle Boar than it does Pillar Field Ox. Because it says, during your turn, it's a 4/5 first striker, but anytime else, it's just a 2/3. It's not bad. Yes, there's a lot of combat tricks you can make it have first strike during your turn, which is not bad. Ondu Rising, I'm like, don't want to say it's bad, but I don't want to say it's great. Like, again, whenever a creature attacks, it gains lifelink is not an irrelevant ability. And this having Awaken 4 is also not bad. Like, you can randomly have a 4/4 lifelinker as well. It literally is great in any racing situation. It's pretty strong. I like this card a lot. Planar Outburst is just a nut bomb. Like, anytime there's a Wrath effect, great. Planar Outburst is one of those effects. Like, card's absurd. Can't beat your opponent's awakened creatures, but card's still very strong. Quarantine Field, another insane bomb. It's basically like O-Ring or more O-Rings. There's nothing wrong with having multiple O-Rings. So we're gonna just say it's great and move on. I don't like Retreat to Emeria that much. I mean, it's okay. Like, it certainly is very good in a grindy matchup where you can be like, okay, I'll just slowly... It's best in the ally deck because you can start getting marginal value with your allies. And then the second ability is not irrelevant. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's bad. I think it's okay. I'm not a huge fan of Royal's Retribution because it's a combat trick that you cast... Like, you have to leave up 5 mana, which is a lot of mana. People can certainly play around a lot of things. So it's you know, it's pretty scary. It's pretty scary that your opponent will be like, well, you've got 5 mana open. What can you have? You just passed. So keep your eyes open. If you got a lot of mana, you might want to play smart around that. Serene Steward is interesting. It almost surely goes into the black-white life gain deck. And it's just a bear. It's an ally with upside. I don't see any reason not to play it. I like my bears with upside. You don't want to play like a ton of them, but it's fine. Shadow Glider is fine. As I said, there's a lot of 2-power flyers and a lot of 2-toughness flyers. So the 2/3 is just a little marginally better. But this guy's okay. Remember, this one's not an ally. You have to keep your eyes open. Sheer Drop, probably the best white common. It's Assassinate plus upside, and I love Assassinate. I just do. Card's super strong. Smite the Monstrous, probably the second best. Probably the second best common in the set. There's a ton of creatures with power 4 great. I was like, once we knew we were having Eldrazi, I said, please print Smite the Monstrous. Please do. Card's great. Stasis Snare, look at that. We hit 3 straight solid white removal spells. Stasis Snare is like O-Ring with Flash. O-Ring's already great. O-Ring plus Flash, also pretty great. Also, it's important to note that if you Stasis Snare something and then use an Eldrazi processor to put it into the graveyard, if the Stasis Snare goes away, the creature doesn't come back. Stonehaven Medic, probably too cute, even for the life gain deck, I think. If you build the nut life gain deck, you definitely want this guy. Like, he's a key component of it because there's not many other ways to gain life. So he's good there, but anywhere else, just don't play him. Don't play him as a 2-mana 1/3. Tandem Tactics feels to me like an absurd 2-for-1. Like, I was a huge fan of in Time Spiral. There was a green mana +1/+2 with flashback of white, and that was so often a 2-for-1. And this is exactly what this feels like. Definitely one of the better combat tricks in the format. Gaining 2 life, sure. It's like icing on the cake, right? You're like, I get to have my cake. I get to eat my cake, and then I get to have extra icing on that cake. It's great. It's great. I love this card. And lastly, we have Unified Front. I mean, you can get 3 1/1s at best normally. You normally don't pull off the full 4-color Converge, but 4 1/1s for 4. It's okay. It's okay. Anyway, that's it for white. Thank you guys all for watching. Be sure to check out the other colors, and I'll see you guys next time.